Hi everyone, this is Amy from the Helms Academy, and today we'll be doing a Reading and Writing Club recap from March 23rd, 2021, when we talked about what to do when you find an unfamiliar word while you're reading. So I'll ask you first, and something to think about as we're going through this lesson, what can you do if you see a word that you don't know while reading? Now, we talked about both whether you are in a space where you can look at a dictionary and when you're not. So oftentimes, if we are practicing something, we're preparing for the GED or HiSET or TASC tests, you'll have access to a dictionary or even just to a Google search on your phone, so you can find definitions for words. But during a test, or even in some other circumstances as well, you may not have time or the ability to look up a word. And so, in those circumstances, are there some things that we can do that help make that process a little bit smoother and help us to better understand the text, even if we don't know every single word? So, we're going to look at some strategies today. Maybe you already have some of these or some of your own, but we'll try to add these to our toolbox so that it makes us stronger readers for those tests. So our first strategy today is using context clues. And context clues mean that you look at what's around the word to see if it helps you figure out what that word might mean. So our first sentence says, Pablo always showed animosity toward his teachers by throwing spitballs and mouthing off, but his sister Mary was kind and sweet. So I have the word animosity here in red. And if I'm looking at this sentence, I see that it's something that Pablo shows. He's demonstrating it in some way. Now, he shows it towards his teachers, and how does he show it? Well, he's throwing spitballs, he's mouthing off, very rude behaviors. Right? And the other clue that I see here is we see a but, and but means we're about to see the opposite. So the opposite of him is his sister being kind and sweet. So when I see that word animosity, I know that there's something from that is causing really rude and terrible behaviors that are not kind or sweet. So whether or not I have a full understanding of this word and I could write a definition for it, I at least have a general idea that it's some sort of kind of negative emotion or demonstration. And when I look at the meaning, it's closer to hatred or extreme dislike. So if I, again, have the opportunity to look up the word, great. That's a great opportunity to add some new vocabulary to your existing knowledge. And especially before you test, it can be really helpful to really build up that vocabulary. But if I don't have a dictionary with me, I can use those context clues to figure out a little bit more about what the word most likely means and help me better understand the text overall. Another strategy that I can use is called fill in the blank. And if I see a word that I don't know, I might think of some other words that would make sense there in the context of the sentence. So for example, 97 pairs is a superfluous number of shoes. So here, if I see 97 pairs, I'm thinking of how many shoes I have and how much space 97 pairs of shoes would take up. Right? So 97 pairs feels like a lot to me. So when I'm thinking about the relationship between the 97 pairs is what kind of number of shoes, I would fill in that blank with like a large number of shoes, right? An extreme number of shoes. So when I look at the definition, yes, I'm on the right track, right? Excessive, extra, surplus, or redundant. But just by looking at some clues around that and thinking of other words that would make sense there, I was able to come up with some possible synonyms that help me to better understand the sentence. Another tool you can use is to figure out the part of speech. So here we want to figure out, is this word describing something? Is it an adjective or adverb? Is it a noun, which is a person or place or a thing? Is it a verb, some sort of action? And part of the benefit of figuring out the part of speech is it helps us figure out what we're looking for here. Are we looking for a synonym for this word that describes something? Are we looking for a synonym for this word that is a thing or a person or a place? And it helps us, especially in conjunction with that fill in the blank strategy. So if we look here, the little girl was showing signs of ocular problems. She squinted to read the blackboard and complained of headaches after working on the computer for too long. So when we look at this, I'm thinking about what is ocular. Is it a thing? Is it a descriptor word? And here I see that it's an adjective because it's telling me about a type of problem, right? It's describing a problem. Now, whether I know what ocular means or not, and here we'll assume just for practice that we don't know what it means, I can look at the rest of the context to figure out what other words might work there. So when I see that she squinted to read the blackboard and had headaches, well, that says to me this is probably a vision problem. So if I can think about signs of vision problems, that makes sense in the context of this sentence. It's another word I could use to fill in the blank. And I know that because I'm looking for a description of what type of problems I'm looking for here. And we know that because of the part of speech. When I look at the definition, ocular means related to the eye. So we hit the nail on the head there. We're able to get a really good guess about the meaning of this word, even if it at first was unfamiliar. Another strategy is to find synonyms, roots, or repetition. So these are three things that could show up in different ways in different writing. Synonyms are words that mean the same or similar things, but they're two different words. Sometimes, especially if you have multiple sentences, you'll see an idea repeated, but in different words. And so you might be able to find a synonym and say, I bet that is the meaning that goes with lunacy. Roots are thinking about where a word comes from and if you know any other part of that word. So for example, if you think about the word respect, respect would be the root, but then we have respectful, disrespect. We can add all of these other pieces to it and it changes the meaning of that root word. But if we know the root, we can often figure out an idea of what it means. Then the last one is repetition. Sometimes we'll see the word that we're looking for or that we're trying to figure out multiple times within a text. And so we'll be able to use the context from those multiple places to get an even better idea of its meaning. So here, let's look at these two sentences. From the far past to the present day, the moon has been thought to cause lunacy. Some studies have shown that this momentary insanity does have some association with lunar phases. So right away, I see these ideas of moon and lunar and lunacy, but it says specifically that it causes lunacy. The moon causes lunacy. So I'm guessing that lunacy is coming from that root word of lunar, and it has having to do with the moon in some way. So we see that connection, but I wonder if there's another word in here that might help us to figure out what lunacy means. When I look at that second sentence, I see some studies have shown that this momentary insanity, that word this is really helpful because it points back to what we were just talking about, which is lunacy. So here we're understanding that the moon is causing lunacy or a momentary insanity. When we look at the actual meaning, we see insanity, madness, or psychosis. Now, if you are working with a word that is unfamiliar and you really are feeling stuck on it, your best bet is to take your best guess and just go ahead and move on. You should never let one word stop you. There will always be some more context. You can always take your best guess about it, but don't get stuck on one word and waste a lot of time there when you could be moving on to other things. That goes for whether you're reading for pleasure or reading on a test. It's better to continue moving and not get stuck on every single word. Imagine if you had a paragraph that had 5 words in it that you didn't know. While it's great to look up some new words and learn some new words, it can also be a hindrance to understanding the whole context of the text. And so we really want to make sure that we're not missing that while also looking at some of these words. So using these strategies can help you move through a little bit more quickly. But when you're feeling really stumped and stuck, you can maybe circle it, you can put a star, you can write it down on your scrap paper, but go ahead and take your best guess and move on. Now let's look at 2 practice sentences here. The first one says, Elena's repudiation of Jerry's bad table manners was obvious to everyone at dinner as she dropped her napkin and left the table. So here we see the word repudiation, and repudiation is something that belongs to Elena, perhaps a feeling. Now she says Elena's repudiation, what is it coming from? What's causing it? Oh, I see Jerry's bad table manners. And what happens because of this repudiation? Well, she drops her napkin and leaves the table. Now, if you can imagine during a dinner or a party, someone dropping their napkin and leaving the table is usually not a good sign. They're perhaps upset about something, they are disappointed about something, they're really sad. There's some kind of negative emotion that generally accompanies that. So although we may not know the exact meaning of repudiation, we can guess that much and understand the general sentiment of the sentence. When we look at the definition, it is denial, refutation, or rejection. Now for the second sentence, it says, busy as a bee and quiet as a mouse are hackneyed phrases. They're used all the time. Now, maybe you've heard these phrases before, busy as a bee, quiet as a mouse. Certainly, they tell us here they're used all the time. They're very frequently used. So how would we describe a phrase that we say is frequently used? When I see the word hackneyed, I think of maybe like overused or perhaps that it's very common. And when I look at the definition, it means trite, cliched, or worn out. So I'm on the right track with my understanding there. Now, this reading comes from a section of a HiSET practice test. This is available for free on their website. And when I looked at this, I thought there were a number of words that are unfamiliar or at least not used very often that may come up for many of us. So what I would encourage you to do is take a moment to read through all of this. You can pause the video here and take a few minutes to read what's on the screen so that you can get an idea of what words stick out to you. Go ahead and pause your video now. So on this screen, I wanted to show you some of the words that stuck out to me that could be words that are unfamiliar or at least not commonly used. I highlighted downy, incongruously, quiver, plumage, astringent, side, constricted, vessels, radiating, inverted, and retina. All of these words can be challenging, and certainly there are some others that maybe you identified as well. In these words, if you think about it from this perspective, if we stopped for every single one of those and looked them up in the dictionary, we would lose sight of what this text was really about. Perhaps a good question for yourself is, what did I learn from this text? Who's talking? What is this person doing? What are they learning or thinking about? Without knowing every single word, you can still get a general idea of the text. Now, some of these words it may be better to have an idea of and take a good guess about before you move on, rather than just kind of skimming over them. And when that comes up, it's good to take some time to really think about the context and see if you can think of what it may mean in this context. But know that you don't have to know every word to still have a good understanding of the text and still be able to answer the questions on the test. So I'd encourage you again, as you're practicing, it's a good opportunity to try out learning some of these words, adding them to your vocabulary, but also know that it's good to practice some test taking strategies, which may include just guessing the meaning of these words from context or skimming over them and knowing that you can still get the general idea without having to stop for every single one. Thank you so much for joining me today and good luck on your tests. We have tons more videos here on the Helms Academy YouTube channel for you to check out and get ready for your HiSET, TASC, or GED tests. You can also check out the Helms Academy on Facebook and Instagram and on our website at helmsacademy.org.